by video or virtually. So just to remind all board members that identify yourself when you're speaking so that whoever is watching or listening knows who in fact is speaking. The other thing is that the other people and the board members is to try to keep it on mute so that we don't have any background noise and try to go forward with that. With that, why don't we just go right to the roll call? Judith?
Yes, sir.
Ready.
Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, State Treasurer Laura M. Montoya,
Present.
Member Michael Sanchez,
I'm here.
Member Paul Cassidy,
Yes, present.
Member Paul Cassidy,
Yes, ma'am, present. Thank you.
Member Wendy Trevisani, Member Joseph Lujan.
Present.
There is a quorum.
Thank you. With that, let's go to an approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda for today?
So moved.
We have a motion by Member Lujan to approve today's agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a
Okay.
second by Member Cassidy. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Treasurer Montoya,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Let's go to item number 3, the approval of the minutes for February 18th, 2025 regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from February 18th, 2025 meeting?
I would move approval. Paul Cassidy.
We have a motion to approve by Member Cassidy, a second by Member Lujan.
Sure.
Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Treasurer Montoya,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
With that, why don't we go to the consent agenda, items 4 through 6. And Ashley, I guess that's your call.
Thank you, Chairman, members. We have a brief consent agenda for today's meeting. As the Chairman mentioned, items 4 through 6. These can be found starting on page 17 of your board meeting materials if you're following along today. The first item number 4, has been submitted by the Albuquerque Metropolitan Arroyo Flood Control Authority, also known as AMAFCA. They're requesting approval of the sale of real property known as the Zacate Blanco Arroyo in Albuquerque to TA Land Company 1 LLC for a consideration of $290,000. If the board provides approval, the approval would be contingent upon the directors and council's receipt and review of a revised and fully executed land purchase agreement and a fully executed quitclaim deed. Item number 5 has been submitted by Central New Mexico Community College. CNM is requesting approval of the second amendment to the lease of real property located at 5600 Eagle Rock Road in Albuquerque to the New Mexico Department of Finance and Administration for an annual consideration of $23,672.24. If approved, approval would be contingent, upon the directors and council's receipt of a fully executed contract addendum or amendment. Item number 6 has been submitted by Logan Municipal Schools. Logan Municipal Schools is requesting approval of the sale of real property in Logan adjacent to Ute Dam to the Village of Logan for a consideration of $105,000. If approved, approval would be contingent upon the directors and council's receipt and review of a fully executed purchase agreement and a fully executed quitclaim deed. And Mr. Chair, members, that concludes the consent agenda.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments by committee members? Seeing none, do we have a motion to adopt items 4 through 6 with a contingency on number 5 and number 6?
Motion to approve with the contingencies.
We have a motion to, I'm having a brain freeze, guys. Motion to adopt items 4 through 6 with the contingencies on 5 through 6. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Member Cassidy. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Treasurer Montoya,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. With that, let's go to items 7 and 8, and I believe, Ashley, are you handling those as well?
Mr. Chair and members, I'll introduce items 7 and 8, but we do have other presenters that I'll defer to for the meat of the presentation. So item number 7 is the authorizing and delegating resolution for the State of New Mexico General Obligation Bond Series 2025 with a maximum principal amount of $290,618,600. If you're following along in your board materials, this begins on page 211. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll hand it over to Board Counsel Luis Carrasco to take you through the particulars of the resolution.
Thank you, Ashley. Mr. Carrasco, good morning. I think you're on mute.
Yes, I am. Good morning, Chairman Sanchez and members of the board. As Ashley mentioned, my name is Luis Carrasco. I'm the board counsel with the Rohde Law Firm. And as she stated, you have before you in your packet the authorizing and delegating resolution for these general obligation bonds, Series 2025. These bonds are a series of long-term bonds customarily issued by the Board of Finance for capital expenditures for certain, actually in this instance, 4 different types of projects. Number 1, certain senior citizen facility improvement, construction, and equipment acquisition projects. Number 2, certain academic, public school, tribal, and public library resource acquisitions. Number 3, certain higher education, special schools, and tribal schools, capital improvements and acquisitions. And finally, number 4, certain public safety, radio communication, stabilization, and modernization projects, all as specified in the 2024 Capital Projects General Obligation Bond Act, and as were approved by the voters at the November 5th, 2024 general election. This resolution is similar to the authorizing and delegating resolutions for prior issues of general obligation bonds in that it authorizes the issuance and public sale of these bonds. Number 2, it sets the parameters for the final terms of the bonds, including a maximum amount of $290,618,600, and allows for maturities extending no longer than March 1st, 2035, and a maximum true interest cost of 7%, with the maximum coupon set at no higher than 8%. It also authorizes and describes the method of sale for these bonds by way of a public competitive sale, and it approves the form of the preliminary official statement to be used in connection with the marketing and sale of these bonds. It also approves a continuing disclosure undertaking, setting forth the board's responsibility to provide ongoing disclosure relating to these bonds. It provides the form, terms, and details of the bonds, addresses the various projects to be financed with the proceeds from these bonds. It secures the bonds with the general ad valorem taxes to be levied on all taxable property in the state, subject to taxation for state purposes, without limit as to rate or amount, and pledges the full faith and credit of the state to the repayment of these bonds. It also incorporates provisions relating to the execution, delivery, registration, transfer, and exchange of these bonds, and creates the various funds and accounts necessary for the proper administration of the bonds, and incorporates provisions relating to the administration of those funds and accounts and the investment of proceeds therein. It does include certain covenants, including covenants relating to the assessment and collection of ad valorem taxes and the maintenance of the excludability from income tax status of the bonds. And importantly, and as you've seen previously, it delegates to the executive officer of the board or the director of the Board of Finance the authority to determine the final terms for the bonds within the parameters that are established in this resolution, and to take other action in furtherance of the authorizing and delegating resolution. As I said before, this resolution is highly similar to resolutions for general obligation bonds you've approved in years past, but I did want to point out one fairly significant difference on the advice of the state's financial advisor. This resolution does delegate to the executive officer and the director of the board the ability to determine the refunding provisions for these bonds. Previously, bonds we've issued did not have an ability to be called for redemption prior to maturity. As I said, with the advice of our financial advisor, they are advising that we allow for call date on these bonds. So we've amended the resolution to incorporate that. We do anticipate that there'd be a 5-year call on these bonds, meaning that the bonds maturing on or after March 1st, 2031 would be callable on March 1st, 2030 or any date thereafter. And those final provisions will be included in the final term certificate that the executive officer or the director will execute at the pricing of the bonds and then present to you at a regular meeting after the bonds are sold. And along those lines, we did have one minor correction to this resolution to reflect what I just mentioned to you concerning the refundability of the bonds. At section 10A, we are recommending just adding at the end of the first sentence of section 10B, the phrase or on such other terms are as provided in the final term certificate at the end of the first sentence of section 10A. That revision would ensure consistency between the parameters established in section 4 and the text of section 10B. As we did in 2023, the full list of projects to be funded with the proceeds of these bonds is included at Exhibit A to the resolution, which are before you. We don't anticipate any changes to that at this point necessarily, but we do expect that if there are, for example, a project that needs to come off the list or some sort of change needed, we would be prepared to come before you at the May meeting with an amending resolution, but hopefully that will not be necessary as we move through our due diligence process on the bonds. And just to give you an overview of sort of the highlights of the dates of this bond sale, we anticipate posting that preliminary official statement on May 7th. We anticipate the sale pricing would occur on May 21st, and that the bonds would close and be issued to the purchaser on May 30th, 2025. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you or any other members of the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Carrasco. Questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chairman, I just have one question.
Member Montoya.
It's more out of curiosity, but on the advance refunding of the bonds and the conversations that are going on at the national level, does there need to be any language within the document in order for us to be able to take advantage of that if it ends up happening in the future?
Member Sanchez, members of the board, no, I don't think we need to update that language. As you know, advance refundings are not permitted at the current moment, but if they should be, if that should be opened up to permit that, the language that's incorporated into the resolution would allow for that. And it does explicitly provide that, you know, anything we do has to comport with the provisions of the Internal Revenue Code. So because that is barred at this time, we would not be able to do that unless there is a legislative a change by Congress to that restriction.
Member Montoya, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. That's all I have.
Thank you, Member Montoya. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Mr. Carrasco, just one, I'm sorry, who was that?
Paul Cassidy, Mr. Chair.
Member Cassidy.
Are we selling 100% of the bonds authorized by voters? Mr. Carrasco.
Chairman Sanchez, Member Cassidy, yes, we are. The total amount of the project doesn't quite get to that maximum amount that we specified, and that was intentional by the legislature. They did include an additional amount to cover cost of issuances, so that gets the difference between the total of the project list and the maximum amount for the bonds.
Thank you, Mr. Carrasco. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing further. Thank you, Member Cassidy. Mr. Carrasco, I was just curious about the language that was added or that's going to be added. It is not added at this point, but will be added?
It is not. We are asking that that phrase that I read off be added at the section, at the end of first section of first sentence of section 10B. So with the board's permission, we will add that. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carrasco. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Ashley, is there anything else we need to look at?
Mr. Chair, not on this item, but before you move towards the vote, I wanted to just note that Lieutenant Governor Morales has joined the meeting.
Oh, good. Thank you. With that, is there a motion to approve item number 7 with the addition of the language that Mr. Carrasco had indicated? Do we have a motion to approve?
Chair Paul Cassidy, I would move approval.
We have a motion to approve by Member Cassidy with the language that Mr. Carrasco had indicated. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Member Lujan. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Lieutenant Governor Morales,
Yes.
Treasurer Montoya,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Governor, it's you're the chair. You got it.
Senator Sanchez, thank you so much. If it's okay with you, being that I'll be pulled out at any moment, it might be a little easier for the flow of the meeting if you're chairing. And it reminds me of old times. You always chaired so well on the floor. I bet you don't miss days like this last week of the session. But if you don't mind, if you chair it, I'd be perfectly happy with that and would avoid disruption if I get called out from time to time.
That'll be fine if that's what you prefer, sure. Yeah, I really missed those last days. You bet.
Midnight last night. Midnight.
Yeah. Well, I was sound asleep by 10 o'clock, so you look pretty good for being up till midnight. So anyway, with that, let's go to item number 8, and that's preliminary official statement for State of New Mexico General Obligation Bond Series 2025. And Ashley, that is yours as well.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members, before I hand this over to Disclosure Counsel, Mr. Guckenberger with Kutak Rock, I just wanted to mention that this preliminary official statement begins on page 303 of your board books, if you're following along. And one thing I would like to mention, although I know Mr. Guckenberger will mention this as well, is that this is in near complete form, but given that we are concluding the session this week and there may be legislative action taken that we would want to disclose, we will be adding any legislative action that is pertinent to disclosure to this document. I will be sharing that with the board members as soon as that is included, which we anticipate being closer to the end of April following the signing period. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will hand it over to Mr. Guckenberger to take you through any particular details he finds pertinent for this document.
Mr. Guckenberger.
Thank you, Ashley. Good morning to the board. Thank you for having me. I'm Ken Guckenberger from Kutak Rock. We serve as the disclosure counsel to the state, and so before you is a draft of a preliminary official statement that will be used to help market the bonds. Basically, the POS, as we call it, along with the notice of sale that was included in the bond resolution, will be posted on May 7th. To a bidding platform, and that will be the backbone of what we sell the bonds on or about May 21st. So we've got 7 weeks until we actually post. So what you have before you today is a substantially final POS that describes, in the case of a general obligation bond, it's the full faith and credit of the state. So it's describing the state's financial condition, not unlike the annual financial information filing we were before you with in December. This particular POS is showing a par amount of $272 million with a premium of about $18.8 million, which gets us to the $290 million of projects that were approved. Just to answer, I think that was Commissioner Cassidy's question. But that number can move back and forth, and that's really set by the financial advisor of the state as we get closer to pricing, and then as we actually price the bonds. So that's the effective thing that will change. As Ashley mentioned, we've got several notations throughout the document of places we will come back to after the session ends to see if there are legislative updates. We think there will likely be quite a few that we will then include in the narrative, and then we will circulate that to the board in a black line document so you can see what has changed from the document before you today. So that is the effective process that we go through. If anybody has any questions about any of the specific tables, I'd be glad to go over them with anybody. We also have a continuing disclosure obligation, which is appended to our document here, which is what we do every January, right? So that's our annual update, as well as any intervening, what we call material events, should they occur. One question that we've been getting from all of our municipal clients is what is the municipal market reacting to the new administration in Washington? What is that doing to our market? And the honest answer is it's too soon to tell. And there may be additional disclosure as we get closer to sale. But right now, I think it's been effectively a constant discussion point, but no one is really doing anything additional to. I think the events in Washington are self-explanatory, and really the most material thing. And we always have a change in law provision to be discussed in our documents, and in particular in the tax language, because we expect a new tax bill to come through Congress this year. And so that may have some implications to what we do in the future. But for now, it's full steam ahead, and with the closing at the end of May. So that's what we'll do. We'll, in addition to approving this POS, you'll authorize us to put the terms of the May 21st sale and deliver that to the purchaser as an official statement. That's the difference between the preliminary and just a regular official statement, is it's got the terms of the sale included. So those little asterisks you see by the par amounts will be taken off, and we'll finalize. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Guckenberger. Any questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chair, this is Paul.
Member Cassidy.
I wonder, Mr. Guckenberger, if you wouldn't mind just reminding us of our obligation as board members in terms of
absolutely
review.
Yes, and in fact, yes. Thanks, Paul, for reminding me of that. This is really our document on behalf of the state, and we encourage everyone to read through it, to provide comments. You can direct comments to Director Leach or Marcos or me directly if you have any questions, any comments. And we do that for our entire working group in our team. It's really a group effort that is led by Ashley and her team to get everyone to contribute, to update, and make sure that they've read the document, so that an investor who picks up this document has a complete picture of what our financial condition is, and that there's no material omissions, things we've left out, and all the pertinent information that an investor would want to see is included. So that's our end goal, and we ask everyone to take the time to read through it as they can. What's nice about this particular timetable we have, and because you don't have an April meeting, is we've got 7 weeks until we post. So we've got ample time for everyone to get through it, and we certainly encourage that participation.
Member Cassidy, you still have the floor.
Sure, thank you. So you would, if we have comments, get them to Ashley, Marcos, or yourself before really early May, right? Before posting.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's just shoot for I would say end of April, and you'd still be timely. But any time between now and April is welcome. And
Mr. Chair, I just want to convey that this is the same document we've reviewed, but it's really complete. I really appreciate the detail. A lot of the tables raise questions just from a clarity standpoint. And do you mind if we send detailed questions that might require more than just a yes or no answer? to dig down a little deeper, especially with regard to recurring revenues and expenditures on page 9. I think it was 9 or 15.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, on that, Member Cassidy, what I would note too as well is that the general fund financial summary will also be updated with any legislative action. And our chief economist, Leo Delgado, updates that. So if you have any detailed questions, or if it would be helpful for us to jump on a call with Leo, he'd be more than willing to do that and walk through any of the changes as well as any of the existing data that might be included in there to provide any clarification or answers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Member Cassidy. Any other questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chairman, just one.
Member Montoya.
Good morning. I just wanted to make sure you got all of the data that we sent over.
We did. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Member Montoya. Ashley, is there anything else we need to discuss?
Mr. Chair, I don't think so. We'll try and send a reminder out towards the end of April to the board members to make sure they get any comments into us. So we'll go ahead and do that, but want to thank the members that have submitted comments already and updates for those. And we look forward to any others that you have as you review the document. And as I mentioned, we will get another draft to you once we've been able to include any actions that result from the session and the signing period.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Mr. Guckenberger. We appreciate it. With that, do we have a motion to approve item number 8?
This is Paul. I would be happy to move approval.
We have a motion to approve item number 8 by Member Cassidy. Is there a second?
Treasurer seconds.
We have a second by Member Montoya. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Lieutenant Governor Morales,
Yes.
Treasurer Montoya,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Let's go
Thank you.
to item number 9. And that's private activity bonds. Bernalillo County requested private activity bond volume cap allocation for the St. Anthony Plaza Apartments in Albuquerque. Who do we have? Marcos, is that yours?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. This is Carolyn Tobias, Bernalillo County Economic Development Manager. And it's my privilege to stand in for Marcos this morning. And on behalf of Bernalillo County, make this request before the board for private activity bond volume cap for the St. Anthony Plaza Apartments in Albuquerque in the amount of $33,500,000. The St. Anthony Plaza Apartments are located at 1750 Indian School in the city of Albuquerque. And they were constructed in 1975. The 160 units are 100% Section 8 affordable. And with this acquisition and rehabilitation, they will remain 100% affordable. Of those 160 units, this rehabilitation will include energy efficiencies along with upgrades, as you might imagine, for the health and well-being of the residents, including formaldehyde-free cabinets and counters, and in general, just increasing the quality of life for the residents there. As you are all aware, we appreciate your support for housing in general throughout Bernalillo County, and we are excited for this project in that the rehabilitation with community preservation partners is really raising the level of the standard of care for these types of housing for our community. And with that, I do have representatives from CPP here, Alexis Castillo, and we're happy to stand for any questions.
Let me ask you, Carolyn, before we do that, Alexis, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Hi, good morning. I don't have anything to add, but if you have any questions, feel free to let me know and I can answer anything here.
All right, sounds good. With that, are there any questions or comments by committee members?
Yeah, on the apartments, This is Member Lujan on the apartments.
Member
how
Lujan,
do
you have-
oh, I'm sorry. How do you, are they occupied now? And if so, how do you gonna rotate those in? Or you plan on doing them all at once or?
Yeah, so they are currently occupied majority of the building. So our plan would to kind of do a sequencing. So we'll start off with 7 units and then go throughout each building. And during that time, we do have a relocation specialist that we have engaged to make sure that we're able to properly relocate all of the residents out for the time frame that they will be out, and then bring them back in with their belongings, and all of which will be paid for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Lujan. Any other questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
Member Montoya.
what is the current capacity of folks utilizing the apartments?
Current capacity, like occupancy, or like the type of
The current occupancy capacity, what's the percentage that are currently in the apartments?
Yes, so currently they're 80% occupied.
So, Mr. Chairman, are you starting with the first 20% on the that are vacant currently, and then moving those people into those vacancy apartments, or where are you moving them to?
Yeah, so we are starting with the building with the largest vacancy right now, and our plan would be to either kind of have a mix of utilizing the units that are available, and then also just dependent on the type of residents and their needs, and if we have that accommodation within that building, then we'll keep them in place, just at a different building. And then if not, depending on their needs, they will be relocated to a hotel with a kitchenette suite.
Mr. Chairman, is the relocation somewhere near that same area?
Yes, we have looked for off-site, but in the area still.
And Mr. Chairman, what's the percentage of people with disabilities that are part of your 80% capacity?
That's a great question. I don't have that currently on in front of me, but I can get back to you with that.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I would just ask if you all would make sure and consider fixing up the apartments that are currently vacant, utilizing those first for folks, especially those with disabilities, before displacing them and putting them somewhere else that might be unfamiliar or unsafe, and then going into the elderly next. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Member Montoya. Any other questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chair, this is Paul Cassidy.
Member Cassidy.
Thank you. Can you remind me, I thought I had seen it, Ms. Castillo, what's the background of your organization? Where are you located? Is this your first project here? Is that what I'm recalling seeing, or no?
No. So we have 2 offices, Community Preservation Partners. We're an affordable housing developer. We have 2 locations, one in Irvine, California, and then one in Virginia. We have partnered with JL Gray as developer only, and have worked with them on over 37 developments throughout our time in New Mexico, but this would be our first property as owner and developer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Castillo. And Carolyn, thank you very much for bringing this. It looks like a great project, and it really targets the people in a very beneficial way for our community.
Thank you, Member Cassidy. I just have one quick question to Ms. Tobias. You said it's 100% affordable. What does that mean?
Thank you,
Anyway.
Mr. Chair. Yes, currently there are Section 8 vouchers for the entire population of the St. Anthony's Plaza, and those will remain Section 8. So Section 8 is the the lowest affordability for residents, and CPP have gone through process with the current ownership in the transition to extend that affordability for the duration of for the duration of the bonds, essentially. So there is currently affordable in Section 8, and it will remain serving that same population.
Thanks. That clarifies it for me. Thank you. Ashley, do we have anything else? Any other questions or by staff?
Mr. Chair, I would defer to Marcos. Marcos, do you have anything to add for this item as you led that review?
Mr. Chair, no items or questions at this time.
Thank you. Do we have, with that, let's go to a vote. I mean, do we have a motion to approve item number 9?
Mr. Chair, this is Paul. I'd be happy to move approval.
We have a motion to adopt or a motion to approve item number 9. Is there a second?
Treasurer seconds.
Second.
We will have a second by Member Montoya. Would you please call the roll?
Yes. Lieutenant Governor Morales,
Yes.
Treasurer Montoya,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Tobias and Ms. Castillo. Thank you very much. You have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. I guess we now go to item number 10. Town of Silver City requests an emergency grant for a funding shortfall related to completion of its community recreation facility. Ms. Lucero?
Sure. Good morning, members of the board, and it's wonderful to see you once again, except this time it's by Zoom. It's always a pleasure. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex in just a moment, but I just want to give you a brief history of where we've come and how far and how long we've been working on this project. We actually started an assessment probably pre-COVID and doing a needs assessment for this recreation facility quite a while back to determine the needs of the recreation needs, not only for Silver City, but this is a Grant County recreation facility that everybody will benefit from. So we started with that feasibility study. And so we've gone through all the pieces of securing land to making sure that we are accommodating the needs of Grant County as well, because that was really something that the mayor of the town of Silver City had the foresight for, and to say, even though it was located in Silver City, he wanted to make sure that this facility was really could be enjoyed by all people and all people in Grant County, but also that there was affordability for people in this recreational facility. So Alex has been dedicated to opening up this facility at no cost to the community members of this county. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, because that's something that we've been looking towards to really help some of our underserved youth. Currently, just as an example, and I run one of the financial groups for the Grant County Youth Basketball. And this is one of the things we're looking forward to. We currently just in our county alone, we're servicing of almost 450 to 500 kids just in youth basketball alone. And so we're looking forward to having this facility so that we can actually have our kids enjoy that facility. So with that little bit of history, I'm going to turn it over to Alex because he has more of the financial understanding from the town, but would be happy to answer any questions in regards to what funding we've pursued and where we've come in regards to that funding. But I'll turn it over to Alex Brown, the town manager.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm Alex Brown. I'm the town manager for Silver City. We've been working on this project since 2018, I believe. Originally, we received capital outlay funds as well as town funds to start working on the design of the project. I want to make it say that we really do consider this project a regional project because it is designed to serve the constituents of the mining district communities, town of Silver City, the county, seniors, and veterans. That's what the project was designed for. So initially, the town of Silver City received capital outlay funds for the design. We then went ahead and borrowed $5 million. $1 million went to the purchase of the property, and then the remaining $4 million has been set aside for the construction. We also went out and secured some private funding from Freeport-McMoRan. That was in the range of about $250,000. And then $10.5 million in additional capital outlay. Initially, the project we were looking at about $15 million for the project, but due to delays and supply chain issues, the project as now we have a shortfall of approximately $1 million. Working with the architects and the contractor, we feel that we will not need any more than $1 million because everything is ordered. And we are actually set to complete the project by early June of this year. So with that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions or comments by committee members?
Yeah, this is Member Lujan.
Member Lujan.
Mentioned you had quite a few change orders. Do you mind sharing some of the change orders? It looks like the square footage was cut quite a bit as well. So I was just curious about the change orders and the overruns.
Yes, we were able to do the project through the design build process. So through that process, you're allowed to bring on the contract before construction starts. So that way they can work with the actual vendors to ensure that we get the best prices available. And because it's the design build process, through the entire process, we've had to change a lot of the materials that we've been trying to get or things like that because, and by far the majority is because of supply chain issues. It's just colors. If we can't get the right colors, I'll give you an idea right now. We're looking for the lockers for the locker rooms. The original material lockers we were looking at are 8. We just got notified that they're 6 months out. So we had to go to another material, different color that is 8 weeks out. So we've been doing that through the entire process.
Okay. And then the change in square foot.
Yes, that was early on. When we first brought on the contractor, originally working with the architects, we were just going to do the design, go out to bid, the normal process. But once we saw, because of all the issues that were caused because of COVID, supply chain, and all those different type of issues, the architects weren't very confident in their estimates based on the materials, the size of everything. So once we brought on the contractor, originally we were at 32,000 square feet. We brought on the contractor and identified that at 32,000 feet, we were looking somewhere around $17 to $18 million. So that's why we decreased the size of the project down to 29,000 square feet to ensure that we were close. We had the funding necessary for the project.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Lujan. Any other questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Governor, absolutely.
Thank you. And I want to thank Alex and Priscilla and Ashley and Marcos for working together to put this on. This was somewhat of a unique kind of situation because the costs that came in, that there was a shortfall. The state has been very helpful making sure that we had capital outlay. And what made this different than having a capital outlay appropriation this legislative session is because of the timing of when the project was set to be completed. And near completion. Grateful that we had the opportunity to have the discussion here with State Board of Finance because I followed this project extremely closely, and I'm grateful that we have this chance to hopefully approve this and move this forward so they can complete their project.
Thank you, Governor. Any
Mr.
other
Chair.
questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chair, this is Paul Cassidy.
Member Cassidy.
I just want to ask the city, Mr. Brown, what have you learned in this process? Just curious about the design bid build process, your architect, your contractor. Or is this all just kind of COVID and the supply chain problem, or were there any problems with professionals? And what have you learned? Because go ahead.
Sir, we're very fortunate here in Silver City because of our charter. We're basically considered home rule when it comes to procurement. So early on in the process, as we were going through the process under the normal process of designing it, putting it out to bid, with everything that was going on with COVID and so many uncertainties back then, and even today, with supply chain and everything that's going on today, I learned that the design build process. This is actually my first building that I built from scratch, and I've been the manager for 24 years. So I've been around quite a while and gone through a lot of processes. But when it comes to large projects like this, the design build is by far the best and easiest process to work through because you can adjust things on the fly. Where you can't do that under the normal design bid process. I would say that 95% of the issues that we had were because of COVID and supply chain issues.
Member Cassidy, you still have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. And really, I think this is for Ashley and Marcos. And Ashley and Marcos, thank you for really actively briefing this and allowing us to understand the time issue constraints. Don't have any issues with that. But in terms of the amount of funds we have available to appropriate for the last remainder of the year, is it $1.6 million, or are any of those other prior awards going to be coming back within the fiscal year?
Mr. Chair, Member Cassidy, so we have a little over 2.6 million remaining in the emergency operating fund. This request, if approved, would utilize $1 million of that. And we have two board meetings remaining this fiscal year in May and June to utilize the remaining 1.6 million that would be left should the board approve this request today. And we're not aware of specific emergency projects coming forward, although there's always discussion in various communities. So we do anticipate receiving additional requests in May and June, but to the extent of which we're unsure of at this point in time. And what was I was going somewhere else with that. But so this does take up a chunk of that capacity, but we still have quite a bit left for those final two meetings. And Member Cassidy, if I missed another portion of your question, let me know. I think I lost my train of thought.
Mr. Chair and Ashley, no, thank you very much. And thanks for securing the $4 million this year. It was very helpful, and the need for more money in the emergency fund for projects like this in uncertain times is just essential. And thanks to Price Secretary Props and the governor for making that happen for us this year. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Member Cassidy. Thank you, Ashley. Who is building and how the build and design? Who was hired to do that? If you don't mind me asking, Mr. Brown.
To do the construction, Bradbury Strab is the contractor.
And the architect? Local?
The architects were out of
Colorado.
Out of Denver, Colorado, and the subs who are actually doing most of the work are out of El Paso.
Okay. I'm just going to ask you some questions because we have some rec centers here in Valencia County and Belen and Los Lunas. What do you have in your gymnasium? Do you have a basketball courts, volleyball courts? Is that part of it, plus the locker rooms and weight rooms and things like that?
Yes, sir. It's basically it's 3 basketball courts. Each basketball court has a volleyball court on it and 3 pickleball courts on it. Each of the courts have dividers so they can be used for different projects. We have a 3-lane track that surrounds the entire the basketball courts. We also have 2 meeting rooms, multi-use rooms that can be separated. Well, it's one large room that can be separated into 2. We have a exercise room, a weight room, as well as a gaming area, the locker rooms, a small concession stand, and then the offices for the staff.
Sure. Can I ask you, what is the flooring that you have in your gymnasium? Is it the hard rubber or is it wood?
It's the wood.
Okay. The reason I asked that question is one of the facilities we have here has the wood floors, and they forget that it needs to be refurbished every once in a while. You know, the sealant that goes on it. I would imagine you are aware of that and that has to be kept up over the years. It looks, the one here is pretty shabby at this point in time, and our city council doesn't seem to be very enthused about getting that resolved. So I just had to bring that up and hope you remember that along the way, because it's pretty important to me anyway.
Yeah, yes, sir. And what's nice with this design build process, we actually had some discussions about the different types of flooring, and through that entire process, they always have. I got to say, our contractors and our architects have been very, very good. They've made sure to even discuss maintenance requirements for long-term and things like that, so I can take those into account while we're making the decisions for selections of material.
Good deal. It sounds like you've really done a great job, you and Priscilla. I congratulate you. I have a feeling this thing is going to fly through here, and it's well deserved, especially in your area where there's a lot of sports activity, to say the least. You have some really good athletes, including the most famous athlete that's come out of the Silver area, and that's the governor, Howie Morales. And so,
yes, sir.
I wish you well in the endeavor, and I'm sure everything will work out. With that, if there aren't any other questions or comments, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
I'm
If I
sorry.
may just add one additional comment, Mr. Chair, and members of the board.
I'm sorry.
So I just wanted to convey that the architect was Barker, Rinker, and CCAT Architecture, based out of Denver, Colorado. The other thing I wanted to also share with you about this facility is that we are going to have a state-of-the-art facility in which we are incorporating technology so that the children now can project things on walls to be able to get that mobile exercise while also having education as part of that facility. So they could play games to learn their math skills, they can learn geography, they can learn other things. And this is part of the new technology that's embedded in that, so we can get our kids to be more involved. And I can tell you one thing that was made very clear by our seniors in this community: we better have pickleball courts or we weren't going anywhere. So that's part of the history of this project. But thank you very much for your support and everything that we do, and extremely grateful.
Priscilla, thank you. Mr. Brown, thank you. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve item number 10? I would imagine Governor Morales would like to make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I so move to approve.
Do we have a second?
I would second that.
Second, Chairman. Nice to see
And
you,
Mr.
Ms.
Chair?
Priscilla.
Hold on.
This
just
is
a minute.
Ashley. May I interject for just one moment?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention to the board members that we have a drafted resolution on page 688 that will provide the parameters for this grant. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that. And I was going to mention when I reported out on our emergency balances, but following Member Cassidy's comments, I thought now would be a good time. DFA has secured $6 million in emergency funding for fiscal year 26, whereas we have $4 million right now. So we do anticipate additional funding in the coming fiscal year. And I want to thank Secretary Props for his support and pushing that forward and that request with LFC. So I just wanted to announce that. I thought it would be some good news for the board members following Member Cassidy's questions.
Thank you, Ashley. And I apologize. I should have gone to you after after my questions to see if you had anything further. My apologies. So we have a motion to adopt by Governor Morales, the second by Member Cassidy. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Lieutenant Governor Morales,
Yes.
Treasurer Montoya,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Congratulations, guys. Good luck in the future.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Have
it.
a good day.
Thank
With
you so
that,
much.
let's go to presentations. And one of my favorites is the South Campus Tax Increment Development District Annual Report. Mr. Cassidy, Member Cassidy and I are really interested in this. Right, Paul?
Yes, sir, we are.
All right. Where are we at?
Okay, I'll jump right in, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This is our annual report on the 2024 activity, the South Campus TID. Just for a little background, the city increment was approved in October of 2021. The county increment was approved in November of 2022, and the state increment in December of 2022. We have 4 years to issue our first bond before the clock starts ticking on the amortization of those bonds. The area contains about 380 acres. It's really broken down into the land that we own at our South Campus. The largest piece, which is about 40 acres that sits south of the Pit and Lobo Village. And then we also have 5 platted tracts on the north side of Gibson between I-25 and University. There's a stub road there called Alumni Road. That's an area where we've seen the first activity within the TID in terms of uses that generate GRT. In September of 23, we sold a site to Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers. That project has been developed. They opened in October of 2024. Around the same time, we entered into a purchase and sale agreement with In-N-Out Burger for approximately 2 acres that wraps around the existing fire station, and it's situated in the northwest quadrant of Alumni Road at Gibson. We anticipate closing on that tract in May of 2025 here, and probably 12 months of development on that tract. We have one more pad site available that in that Gibson little commercial corridor down there. And we've had a lot of activity on that recently, especially given their opening of Raising Cane's and In-N-Out Burger. So we anticipate some activity on that in the near term. The biggest thing we've been working on is what we've labeled Lobo Crossing Shopping Center. And it is a approximately 38-acre site. We are in the final stages of negotiating an agreement with the developer. This project has a national credit anchor tenant that's a mix of grocery and hard goods. And they paused in our marketplace during COVID and then post-COVID due to some of the crime activity in the area and theft. They have now become comfortable with the policies that the state has taken relative to theft, as well as some local measures. They are kind of back on board. And so we hope to wrap this up here, the negotiations, in a few weeks. It'll be a 350,000 square foot shopping center, a major national retail anchors and junior anchors, and would generate a significant amount of gross receipts to the TID. Based on the proposed tenant lineup, it looks like about $4.5 million of gross receipts tax per year. So we're cautiously optimistic that we're going to bring this to a closure, and that'll have really dramatic impact on this area of town. It's kind of a food desert. There's not a convenient grocery store and shops for the residents of the community. And if there's any, just stop me if you have any questions as I kind of move forward. The other area that we're also working on is we have what we call our gateway corridor at South Campus. It's Avenida Cesar Chavez between I-25 and University Boulevard. We've got with the growing interest in potential uses in that corridor, we are looking at trying to self-perform on a small retail project to bring some restaurants in a sports-oriented facility to that, or sports-oriented restaurant to that corridor. If we're successful with the Lobo Crossing Shopping Center, that corridor blows up, and we will have a significant amount of activity along that corridor in the near future. We're currently working on with a national credit full-service restaurant that's interested in a location along Avenida Cesar Chavez. The other two areas, and these are kind of almost like little string annexations in the TID. It's the northwest corner of University and Central. We own approximately 4 acres there. It's a redevelopment site. We're working through the feasibility of what it's going to cost to bring that land in production. We've had a lot of interest over the last 2 years from housing users, apartment users, and retail-oriented users. And then the last kind of area that we're focusing on is the northwest corner of Girard and Central, a site on our campus. And we're in conversations with a local hotel developer that wants to bring a university-affiliated full-service hotel to that corner. And that's kind of a use that we've been targeting for a number of years. It supports not only the campus, but it'll also support the business community in Nob Hill. So that's kind of the major kind of commercial activity that we're working on right now. And I'll pause if there's any questions on any of those projects.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chair, Paul Cassidy, I'll start.
Member Cassidy.
Hi, Mr. Neal. Curious if you've done any analysis financially on what the bonding capacity is currently or will be, and as you go forward, and like where are we now? How much cash has been accumulated from the increment? Do you have a sense for that? Is that a fair question for today's meeting?
Absolutely a fair question. And I think there's a memo that you may have in front of you in the back page that it shows where we thought we were going to be and where we're at relative to gross receipts coming into the TID. Obviously, coming out of COVID, some of our plans were derailed, have been postponed. There's $240,000 sitting in the district coffers right now. We're pretty confident that's going to increase rapidly here over the next few years. In my mind, I think we had maybe a 2 to 3 year setback on real growth and activity, because of events of COVID and the uncertainty surrounding retail post-COVID. So Jill Sweeney, I spoke with her a few weeks back to start trying to get some guidance. She's the bond counsel for the district and get some guidance. I don't have a specific number yet. We're working off some of the projected GRT numbers, but that's something I can get back and report at a later date. I can tell you it'll clearly be enhanced if we're successful with this shopping center project. That's what's going to bring the lion's share of the new GRT to the district.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I continue?
Absolutely. Member Cassidy.
One of the other items when this was created, that the intent to create was space for occupancy by folks that would be leasing, like National Labs or High Tech, so forth. How are those discussions going? Is there progress there? Is there interest there? And realizing you can't build it until you have debt capacity to issue debt to fund the infrastructure.
Yeah, one of the centerpieces of our goal, the TID, is to energize our science and tech park by creating additional space for research and development. And we're still planning to do that. We partner with a number of other governmental entities, principally Sandia National Labs. We're still working with them on the future of their occupancy at the Science and Tech Park. They have a large presence currently with the Advanced Material Lab. But we have this exploding demand for research bioscience space in Albuquerque, not just from institutional users, but entrepreneurs and private startups. So we're going to really, as we kind of get a better handle, try to frame what it is we need to construct at the Science and Tech Park to meet some of those needs. So the conversations are ongoing, but I think you're right. Until we get a better handle on what the time and the potential bonding capacity to assist with that, we're just going to keep an eye on that.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Neal. Okay to continue?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. I understand that Mr. Campbell is retiring. And just what is the plan? Are you taking over as the executive director, or do you have a plan?
I've been asked to perform the role as interim executive director. I'm not sure about the long-term plans of the administration, but I'm involved in all of these transactions. So there's not a tremendous amount of catch up. I work closely with David Campbell and his predecessor, Kelly Ward. So hopefully there won't be too big of a drop off.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Neal. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Member Cassidy. Questions or comments by committee members? Okay.
If I may, just the last section here is in the resolution approving the state increment. There was a request to report on our measures to reduce crime or criminal activity in the district. And I think probably the most important thing we've recently done is the acquisition of the Motel 6 that sits on Avenues of Cesar Chavez in the southeast corner of that intersection. We closed on that February 14th. The board approved this several months back. What we found was pretty horrendous, and the amount of criminal activity, organized criminal activity occurring in that facility was pretty shocking. And so we're really thankful that the board approved the transaction and that with the support of our regions, because I think we've eliminated a major threat at our South Campus. So that facility will be torn down within the next 30 days, and then we'll put that land back into production as for mixed use commercial. And we will avoid any kind of uses that will create a similar situation as what existed there. So we continue to work with our housing partner, American Campus Communities, state and local law enforcement, as we have had some fairly major violent crimes in the area, and what can we do collectively to keep our students, faculty, staff, visitors safe, in this area of town. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Again, any questions or comments by committee members? I have a few questions. There was an indication that I-25 is going to be a major factor in terms of access into the area. Can you fill us in on what, if anything, has happened there and what the plans are?
There's a couple long-term projects that will have impacts, on the I-25 interchanges. But one of them is there is a strong desire from the Department of Transportation to correct that curve as you're coming coming north towards the Big I intersection. That curve caused a lot of traffic. We've been in, along with lots of folks in our community, conversations about the strategy to relocate that curve or straighten out the curve. One of the strategies, it clips some of our land on the east side of I-25, and it has a greater impact on the APS lands that sit north of us. But it would, if they shifted that road and straightened out the curve to the east, it would have some impact on our land. My understanding is the sequencing of the interchanges is the I-25 Comanche. They would move down to Gibson and I-25 at that intersection. and then I think coming back up to the Avenida Cesar Chavez I-25. But the timeline of those improvements is quite a ways out there, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about. Is that the time going to be before or after? Let's say that you get the big shopping center areas. Is that going to create some issues along the way, or does that create issues?
Mr. Chair, I think the timing, this project will occur much sooner than the reconstruction of those interchanges. So I think as we work with a developer, we're going to try to be really cognizant of what those changes might be, so that we don't create a trap for us many years down the road. I think overall we're really excited about it because you've been to sporting events and major functions down there. It can be very difficult getting in and out of the area, especially if you're traveling I-25. So again, that's pretty far down the road, those improvements to the interchanges.
Okay. In terms of the research and development, tell me a little bit more in terms of I think you called it a science tech park.
Yes.
What kind of research and development are we looking at?
So when we submitted the TID application, I think this still holds true. One of the cornerstones of this project is developing a research and development facility that would be materials research, optics research, many of the technologies that are being researched at Sandia National Labs. But also we've got tremendous amount of need for bioscience research, wet labs, dry labs. So as we kind of move forward, we're going to try to develop a facility that's very flexible in terms of the science. There's some great concepts on how you develop labs, so you can, as science changes, you can change the flexibility of that space over time. So the specific types of science in the research building, Mr. Chair, we're still working on that. But I know it will be somewhere in the areas of material sciences, and biosciences, and how we mix those uses. That's something we're just going to have to figure out.
And I would imagine, Mr. Neal, that you're watching what's happening in Washington in terms of research and development there, and will adjust accordingly, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I think we'll, hopefully by the time we get more clarity on a project, there'll be some resolution as to funding resources coming out of the federal government, how that impacts our partner, Sandia National Labs, in our internal researchers.
The last couple of questions. Would you go over this Gateway corridor again for me? I mean, I'm not sure where that is exactly.
Yeah, that's that's what we're calling that entrance off of I-25 along Avenida Cesar Chavez. That's what we view as a gateway to South Campus.
Okay. And that's that Motel 6 that you're going to tear down, correct?
That's correct.
And then there's another area. I think it's across the ditch, if I'm remembering correctly, or an arroyo. And is that where you're thinking that these restaurants, sports restaurants, may come in? And I remember at one point in time, Urlacher, a former Lobo football player, was talking about opening some kind of a sports restaurant along this area somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think we've got several sites, but they're on the just to the east of the Motel 6 across the ditch is 4 acre site. I think that's the one you're referring to. We have that site. We also have a 1.5 acre site that sits between Lobo Village and the pit on the north side. That's where we're targeting kind of a small scale little retail project to serve the needs of our students, the visitors, and then the folks that work in the Science and Tech Park. We would like to self-perform on that. In this area, we don't envision selling any of those parcels. We want to retain it either through ground leases or development that's done by Lobo Development. So that would be a smaller scale project of 4 acres. We would probably target a mix of users, hopefully some national credit users and some local retailer restaurants there. We also have on the northeast corner of I-25 and Avenida Cesar Chavez, a 14-acre site. That's part of our gateway as you enter that. It's a pretty prominent site that fronts on I-25. We don't have any proposed uses for that at the moment. And then there's a couple other sites along that Avenida Cesar Chavez corridor that are kind of rough, that have rough topography. And over time, we hope to kind of bring those into production as the economics permit.
Sure. And you mentioned something about housing. Are we talking about student housing? What type of housing are we talking about?
So at this point, I don't know that we have a small demand. We just went through a housing study for UNM, and I think it indicated we need about 300 more beds. There's not an immediate initiative by UNM to facilitate a UNM housing project, but we continue to get inquiries from other groups that are trying to do affordable housing, market rate housing. We've got some fairly prominent sites. We don't have any specific use targeted for housing at our South Campus. We do get, I think I mentioned that when I was talking about the Central and University site, we do get a lot of interest in housing at that corner, both a mixture of subsidized housing and market rate housing. But we're just, that site's going to be really tricky for us because we've got some embedded users, our Center for Advanced Research Computing, our Arts Lab. It has topography. It's going to be a difficult challenge to bring that site back into production. But I'm working on a feasibility analysis for the Regents right now on that.
Thank you. The last question is, there is a cemetery on that property, on some of that property, that I believe is kind of where In-N-Out Burger, not where it's at, but somewhere close to that vicinity. Has that been taken care of, and is that protected?
It's not controlled by the university. It sits across the arroyo in the kind of the northeast corner of the frontage road in Gibson. And so none of our development is going to have any adverse impact on that. But to be candid, I'm not sure the status of that cemetery and who's responsible for maintaining it. And so we have no plans to do anything that touches that. But again, I'm not sure who's maintaining that cemetery at this moment.
Is there any way you can find out and let us know who is?
I can absolutely find that out.
Just make sure that it's not affected by anything that we're doing.
Will do.
Okay, I appreciate that. I guess I've taken up enough of your time. I'm sorry. Any other questions or comments by committee members? With that, Ashley, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Mr. Chair, just want to thank Mr. Neal for presenting today so thoroughly and providing the memo. We did provide that to the board members in a separate email yesterday. So hope you all have that, but if you don't, just let us know.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Mr. Neal. Thank you for your time today. Okay, Ashley, I guess we have informational items 12 through 19.
Yes,
Well,
Mr. Chair, would you like me to take these individually or kind of in a block?
I think you know best, whichever way you prefer.
All right. Well, I will go through them and just pause for questions after each, if that works, Mr. Chair.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So we have several informational items, primarily our standard reporting items that we bring before the board each month. We begin with our two GSD reporting items monthly. Item number 12 is GSD's Capital Buildings Repair Fund Financial Status Report for January of 25. This is on page 912 of your board books to follow along. For February, GSD expended $32 million or 78% out of a total of $41 million in awards. Revenues into the fund for February totaled $1.6 million. And expenditures totaled just over 112,000. And the fund balance the fund balance for fiscal year 25 as of February was 43.8 million, with 31.2 million uncommitted. GSD in the packets in your board books provides some narrative on some of the key initiatives that they were undertaking and the expenditures that they have made. And again, this fund comprises projects that GSD completes for state buildings and is funded out of an allocation from the Land Grant Permanent Fund. Mr. Chair, that concludes item number 12. If anyone has any questions. All right, moving on to item number 13, also from GSD, this is the Legislative Capital Projects Financial Status Report for January of 25. This reflects expenditures and appropriations for projects that GSD oversees. For February, there was a total of $209.8 million, or 43% of expended out of a total of $490 million appropriations that GSD is overseeing. And these appropriations cross several of the most recent fiscal years. And again, this report is accompanied in your board packets with some narrative on some of the key projects that GSD is overseeing for which it has received capital appropriations. And that will conclude that report if there are any questions. All right, item number 14 is the State Treasurer's Office investment report for January. So at the end of January, the State Treasurer managed $17.2 billion in assets, which is just slightly higher than what it was in December. During the month, the office earned approximately $57.2 million from its investment positions, and on an unrealized mark-to-market basis, the portfolio increased by $12.1 million. And on page 922 of the board books, the State Treasurer's Office report is included. The executive summary is just following the minutes and provides some additional bullets discussing some of the movement in the markets for the month of January that led to the resulting report that I just provided on earnings and assets managed. And that concludes the State Treasurer's monthly report. All right, then moving on to the reporting of the emergency balances. As of today, the operating reserve fund had a balance of $2,581,356 million out of $4 million appropriated, and the emergency water fund, has been fully expended. On page 1033 of the board packets, you can see all of the awards that have been provided by the board this fiscal year. That reflects awards to the Village of Columbus in September, Cañada de los Alamos Mutual Domestic in October, Casas Adobes in November, and then Bernalillo County Metro Court in January. And then, of course, the board's action today for the city, town of Silver City will be reflected in next month's report, which will be provided in May. Moving on to item number 16, this is the fiscal agent and custodial bank fees report on page 1035 of your board materials. In February, the Board of Finance continued to realize negative net fees for fiscal agent and treasury services driven by the 2.5% earnings credit and the large balances subject to earnings being held. Gross fees prior to application of the earnings credit totaled $99,939, which was slightly lower than the fees realized in January. And then the custodial bank fees, which vary little from month to month, totaled $13,344 for January. And those invoices are delayed an additional month than what we receive from Wells Fargo for fiscal agent fees. And then moving on to item number 17, this is the reporting of the Department of Finance and Administration's approved joint powers agreements for the month ended February of 2025. This can be found on page 1038 of your board materials. We had 4 JPAs reported in February, or approved in February, one between the City of Las Cruces, Doña Ana County, and the town of Mesilla to establish a metropolitan planning organization between all the parties for the urbanization of Mesilla Valley. So I expect that the metropolitan redevelopment area that may be created down there, or at least overseen by this organization under this JPA, may consider coming to the board for state GRT increment in the future under recent changes to the Metropolitan Redevelopment Act. We have the New Mexico Charter School Education Service Association to establish the New Mexico Charter School Educational Service, to establish the Sacramento School of Engineering and Science. We have a JPA between Catron, Sierra, and Socorro counties. This amends an existing JPA from 2022, which changes the fiscal agent of the County Livestock Loss Authority, which is an organization composed of these 3 counties. So it changes the fiscal agent and then expands the coverage of geographical coverage of the areas affected by the Mexican Gray Wolf Recovery Program. And then the final item is another establishment of a new charter school. This is the Sun Mountain Charter School. And this JPA is between that charter school and the New Mexico Charter School Education Service Association. And that concludes the 4 JPAs that were approved by the board in February. Then on page 18, I have a slightly longer presentation, Mr. Chair, on this item. This is a non-standard informational item. But you can find this on page 1040 of your board packets. It's a brief 2-page report on the activity of the Board of Finance for calendar year 2024 for board actions, and then fiscal year 24 for bond issuances and draw disbursements. So looking at this report, and we do try and provide this annually to the board and any others that may be interested in the board's activity. But on the first page of this report, you'll see that the board held 10 meetings in calendar year 2024. It had a total of 272 agenda items, of which 185 were action items. So a lot of work on the board's part for calendar year 24. In this table, we detail out some of the actions and considerations made by the board. The first 2 items are showing higher education institute related actions. So the board approved 72 capital expenditures brought forth from higher education institutions. 62 of those were new requests for expenditures, and 10 were revisions to previously approved expenditures. The new higher education capital expenditures, the 62, totaled $358.9 million in capital expenditures for higher education institutions in the state. And that those approvals were brought forth by 10 higher education institutions, noting that I'm combining UNM and UNMH as one institution there. And then again, we had 10 revisions to capital expenditures approved, totaling $607.1 million, and that's the total funding, including the revisions, so not just the revision amount. The board did not consider any higher education financings in calendar 2024. And then the board approved 2 graduate programs, both brought forward by NMSU. Looking at real property dispositions, there were 52 real property dispositions considered by the board. For the property sales, there were 20 sales approved by the board, totaling $50 million. Those were brought forth by 10 counties, 4 school districts, 3 quasi-governments, 2 state agencies, and 1 utility entity. As far as leases, the board approved 32 real property leases in calendar year 24, with 5 of those being amendments to existing leases. And the majority of leases brought forth and approved came from counties, so 21 of those 32. So between the sales and the leases, counties are the primary entities bringing forth those considerations for the board. As far as emergency funding requests, I am reporting the emergency funding requests in total for the calendar year, but please note we typically look at these on a fiscal year basis given the appropriation. But in calendar year 24, the board approved considered 10 emergency funding requests for $3.1 million. Those were to the Secretary of State, the New Mexico Developmental Disabilities Council, the Village of Bosque Farms, the City of Portales, the Village of Hurley, the 5th Judicial District Attorney, the Village of Columbus, Cañada de los Alamos, and Casas Adobes Mutual Domestic. The board also considered 6 concession contract amendments for the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department for concession contracts at Elephant Butte, Hyde Memorial State Parks. The board took 4 actions on contracts and procurements that the board oversees. In calendar year 24, the board procured a new Disclosure Council Services contract. The board approved a short-term arbitrage services contract, and I would note that currently we are out to bid for a 4-year contract for arbitrage services following the board's approval several months ago. We also procured a new contract with American Express, and we also procured a short-term contract for rulemaking services. Moving on to private activity bonds, the board approved 5 private activity bond allocations totaling $185.7 million. These requests came from Housing New Mexico, NMFA, Bernalillo County, and Santa Fe County. As far as carry forward requests, the board took one action on carry forward allocation totaling $88.7 million. The board provided to Housing New Mexico that full carry forward amount. And then the board also considered 3 private activity bond cap extensions, totaling $159.9 million. Those requests came from NMFA and Housing New Mexico as well. And then as far as General Services Department contracts and amendments, the board considered 4 of these types of transactions totaling $187.5 million, but 3 of them were for amendments. The one new contract approved by the board was for the NMBHI forensics facility in Las Vegas, and that was for $84.1 million. The amendments were for other facilities such as the Veterans Homes down south and the forensics lab in Santa Fe. Other items are listed below this that the board took action on. They're kind of standard items. The board set the interest rate policy for the calendar year. The state treasurer's office performance benchmarks were approved and the E911 budget. But I'd also note that unique to this calendar year, the board did update its post-issuance compliance policy, as well as move forward with the rule promulgation for 2 existing State Board of Finance rules, both the property dispositions and the higher education institutions capital expenditures. And the board received 2 special presentations in calendar year 24 on the Tobacco Settlement Fund and arbitrage and the relevance of arbitrage rebate. And then below that, I just included a listing of the board's standard informational items that it typically hears, such as those that I just presented prior to this item. And then moving on to page number 2, this relates to fiscal year, not calendar year activity, because these are our bond sales and our disbursements of bond proceeds. So in fiscal year 24, the board had 4 sales of senior and supplemental severance tax notes combined. 2 senior severance tax notes, 2 supplemental severance tax notes, totaling $772.3 million. For the senior severance tax notes, it funded 132 capital projects. That included 32 appropriated projects and approximately 45 Water Trust Board projects, 41 Colonias projects, and 17 tribal projects. I did not include specific projects that were funded through the Housing Trust Fund, just because that detailed information isn't as readily available. And then for the supplemental severance tax notes, we do have listings of projects being funded, but it just takes a little bit more to go in and identify those specific projects, but I'm happy to provide that information should the board like to see that. And then below that table, I'm looking at the high level of the amount of funding provided. We have the amount of proceeds dispersed by the board. And I really want to highlight this because the division staff that don't often attend our board meetings are the ones that effectuate these disbursements. And I think it's really important for the board to know how much work goes into making sure that those bond proceeds are sent out efficiently per rule. And we have a great team at the division, Nicholas Gonzalez and Alicia Apodaca, who are the leads on making sure these funds get to those local entities and state agencies for their projects. So as you can see in fiscal year 24, almost $1 billion, about $909 million was dispersed to entities receiving capital outlay from bond proceeds. The monthly average dispersed was $27 million with an average of 144 draw requests processed. And the entities requesting disbursement, I should say the state agencies, which are the oversight agencies through which these disbursement requests flow, totaled 42. And the other thing that I wanted to mention as I conclude the report is something we haven't reported to the board before, but our staff, led by Deputy Director Trujillo, has just gone live with a new IT system to improve and make more efficient the processing of the draw requests. So prior to COVID, everything was on paper. Then when COVID hit and we went remote, Deputy Director Trujillo revised that process to have it be kind of, emails and somewhat online as much as we could during COVID. But we have now like I said, moved forward with a new system. It just went live, I want to say a week or two ago, where all of these state agencies are submitting these draw requests through a new portal. It improves the efficiency significantly of us reviewing these requests, making sure they're accurate and correct, and getting these funds out to these state agencies and then to the local entities. So really, really very happy to present this and notify the board of this. It has been a long time coming. It makes huge efficiencies at the division, but it also makes sure that we're getting that funding out timely and accurately to all of those requesting entities. And so I want to just, again, really thank Deputy Director Trujillo for his leadership on that system, and then recognize the work and efforts of our staff, Nicholas Gonzalez and Alicia Apodaca. They've also been involved and are leads on making sure this funding gets out. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will stand for any questions on this report before I move to the final item.
No, but a quick comment, just thank you for that report. And as I've said before, this staff that you have, the staff that's helping us all, is just absolutely fabulous. And I can't say enough about it. It just, you guys are great, and the people that support you and in turn support us, thank them. I hope they're listening, because I want to thank them and really let them know how important they are to all of us. And again, thank you. And thanks to the staff, every single one of them. Thank you.
All right. Oh, sorry.
May I just say, amazing productivity. I know you guys are busy, but seeing on paper is incredible. So thank you. And thanks for what you do.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Chair, so our last item, which I'm looking forward to getting through without coughing incessantly as I did last month, is our legislative report. So we are, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, in the last week of the legislative session. So some of these items are still pending final action potentially, or passage through both sides of the legislature. But I did want to provide this update, and there isn't a document that I've shared with the members. What I plan to do is, following the close of the session and the signing period, I typically send out kind of a memo that lists all of the actual legislation that was passed and signed into law. So I plan to do that, but I do have some notes on this. So if it is helpful, I'm happy to send this out to the board after the meeting, as I did last month. But I want to start first off with the Board of Finance bill, which is Senate Bill 274, which amends the statutes that govern real property dispositions that come to the board, as well as real and personal property dispositions that are approved at state agencies and the legislature. This bill has passed the Senate with flying colors. There were unanimous approval in both the Senate committees as well as the Senate floor. It is awaiting scheduling by the House Judiciary Committee at this point in time. And so that's where we're at with this, and I'm eagerly looking to see if it gets scheduled for the Judiciary Committee tomorrow. House Bill 47 has passed both the House and the Senate, and that bill implements the provisions of the constitutional amendments, increasing the veterans' property tax exemptions. Those amendments were approved by the voters this last November. The bill does contain an emergency clause and would become effective immediately on signature by the governor. Again, those constitutional amendments increase the property tax exemption for veterans from $4,000 to $10,000. And it also allows a proportional property tax exemption equal to the percentage of service-related disability for veterans who are disabled. Senate Bill 357, which has passed the Senate and is also now scheduled or waiting to be scheduled by House Judiciary, creates enabling legislation for the constitutional amendment approved by the voters in 2022 that exempted expenditures on essential services primarily to residential users. This bill would allow state and local support for infrastructure projects, primarily to residential areas relating to broadband deployment, energy, water, and wastewater services. The support also must be explicitly authorized by law, which is a provision of this bill. The bill and these projects that would be funded under it The local government division of the Department of Finance and Administration would be overseeing those projects, providing technical assistance and setting project performance benchmarks and accountability measures. Since under this exception to anti-donation, we do have public funds being provided potentially to private entities to provide those essential services to residential areas. In a related legislation, House Memorial 27 has passed the Memorial Tasks and Interim Committee with developing legislative proposals for implementing that 2022 exception, I believe, in addition to Senate Bill 357. And recommendations of that task force would be presented for the 2026 legislative session. And then moving on to some other bills that we're watching very closely, House Bill 330, the Land Grant, Merced, and Acequia Infrastructure Bill has passed the House and is scheduled for Senate Finance. Severance tax bonding capacity out of the senior severance tax bonding capacity annually, similar to our other earmarks right now, tribal, colonias, and water, trust board, and housing trust fund. This bill has since been amended to increase the earmark allocation for tribal projects as well from 4.5% to 6.5%. And I did just see another amendment was put in place to increase the colonias earmark from 4.5% to 5.5%. These the Land Grant, Merced, and Acequia Infrastructure would be administered by DFA Local Government Division, but there we do have the Land Grant Commission and the Acequia Board that would be identifying projects to utilize this earmark funding. House Bill 145 has passed the House and is scheduled for Senate Finance. The bill provides authorization to the New Mexico Department of Transportation to issue up to $1.125 billion in transportation funds. It was amended to include provisions on how projects will be prioritized, but as I mentioned, that bill should be getting heard in Senate Finance very soon. Senate Bill 481 is scheduled for the Senate floor and then would move to the House, so it still has a little bit of a ways to go. But this bill, I didn't present on this last month. It was dropped following last month's meeting, but this bill establishes the State Fairgrounds District, which is a new governmental subdivision with authority over state fairgrounds and selected surrounding areas. The structure and powers of the State Fairgrounds District are derived from elements of both the Tax Increment Development District Act and the Metropolitan Redevelopment Code Act. So essentially, the district would have the authority to issue up to $500 million in bonds, and those bonds would be secured and repaid by an allocation of 75% of the gross receipts tax and gaming tax revenues in that State Fair district. The district is granted various powers within this bill, including the acquisition of land, the altering of boundaries, the selling or disposing of property, and the levying of property taxes, in addition to the authority to issue revenue bonds to fund improvements within that district. Within this bill, as it is right now, there was an early committee substitute. The Board of Finance is required to review and approve the development plan of the district, the district and its bond issuances. Staff have recommended that the bill include language allowing for rulemaking authority, since the board will be approving the development plan and the bond issuances. And we've also recommended inclusion that the district would be able to be charged a fee by the division to cover the costs of reviewing the development plan and the bond issuances, as that could be a bit of a heavy lift, but since it's not a reoccurring cost, it's difficult to build in a request to the board's budget to cover requests and reviews of requests that may come in. And then there's a couple of other bills that impact Board of Finance, but in not a significant way, but an important way. And those are Senate Bill 202 and Senate Bill 218. So Senate Bill 202 has passed the Senate and is with House Judiciary as well. It's a cleanup bill for the State Investment Council, but in relation to the Board of Finance, it includes a change where the Capital Development Program Fund that was created during the last session, and that the board funds through the issuance of severance tax notes, that fund under the existing statute is held within the severance tax bonding fund. And this bill would have it be pulled out of the bonding fund and just be held at DFA. We support this bill or this change. Essentially, the way the statute stands right now, the board issues severance tax notes and a portion of that goes to the Capital Development Reserve Fund. and then a portion comes back to the program fund. If that program fund is held in the severance tax bonding fund, we'd have to issue another note. So we would basically be issuing two notes to just utilize that development program fund. So this is a nice cleanup, and I think will make it much more efficient to get that funding where it needs to go. And then House Bill 218, which has passed the House and is waiting to be scheduled for the Senate floor. This is a tax cleanup bill brought forth by TRD, but there is a small provision in it that grants the board authority to promulgate rules relating to considering gross receipts tax increment dedications for metro redevelopment areas. So we want to make sure that we have that in statute and can promulgate rules as we anticipate those requests coming forward to the board soon. And then the last bill I would mention is Senate Bill 31. This doesn't have a direct impact, I would say, on the Board of Finance, but I think it's an important bill to mention. It's passed the Senate and is with House Appropriations and Finance. This bill seeks to assist public entities that have received FEMA funding in moving projects quickly while they await that FEMA funding. So essentially, it establishes the Natural Disaster Revolving Fund to provide zero interest loans to political subdivisions of the state and electric cooperatives that have been approved for FEMA public assistance funding. So essentially, while these entities await FEMA funding, this Natural Disaster Revolving Fund could provide zero interest loans to those communities so that they can get recovery efforts underway while they await FEMA funding. And then when that FEMA funding comes in, they could then utilize, or then they could repay the state with that FEMA funding. And I would note that that fund, and there's also a federal reimbursement revolving fund as a part of this bill, but both of those funds do have, the statute has a provision where a portion of that funding can be utilized for the administration of those funds, which would fall under the local government division at DFA. And then I would also note that there's a provision that the appropriation contingency fund, there's a mechanism where the Natural Disaster Revolving Loan Fund will maintain a balance of $150 million annually for natural disaster funds, and that maintenance will come from the Appropriation Contingency Fund. And then finally, I would just note a few bills that we were tracking but don't appear to be moving or have been tabled include amendments to the anti-donation clause of the Constitution and enabling legislation for that, changes to para and ERB COLAs for certain retired members, and also the Senate Bill 266, which had the Board of Finance reviewing and approving higher education institution contracts. And then there was also a bill that had the Board of Finance providing emergency loans specifically to Chavez County. That conflicted with the Senate Bill 31 that I just mentioned, and that appears to not be moving at this time. And I know that was a lot, Mr. Chair, but some very interesting bills that I think would be helpful for the board members to be aware of. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you again, Ashley. You'll be sending us those bills as well, so we'll all have them.
Yes, I'll send this right up, Mr. Chair, after the meeting, and then I'll have a formal memo once the signing period concludes that shows the bills that made it through and were enacted that we want to just be aware of.
And the two bills that that the Board of Finance has sent to be adopted are those the bills that are in House Judiciary? Then has it been?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Senate Bill 274, we're awaiting scheduling with House Judiciary, and then it would go to the House floor.
Is that the only bill? Has the other one gone through?
That's the only bill that the board, the division itself is bringing forth at this time.
Okay. So we have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we have 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll get through. But anyway, thank you again. Thank you very much. And I'm glad you're feeling better. You did a great job today. You really did. So thank you. And again, thank the staff. Are there any questions or comments by any committee members? Seeing none, I guess at this point in time, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So
Nobody wants to adjourn.
I would move adjournment.
We have a motion to adjourn by Member Cassidy, a second by Michael Sanchez. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Lieutenant Governor Morales, Treasurer Montoya, Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
I'm here as well, Lieutenant Governor.
Okay, motion passes.
I would have just moved on my own to adjourn anyway, so it didn't. But anyway, thank you all very much, members. I appreciate you more than you know. And of course, the staff, you're great. Thanks for everything you do to make us look good. Appreciate it.
Good luck in court, Senator.
Thank you. You all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.